From our perspective, the word primitive wouldn't mean backwards or ignorant. It would just mean that it's original. So we want to look at, the original Baptists in America were much more about free speech. You had much more kind of liberal and progressive thinking, I think, among Baptists, especially in the early colonies and going through. It's just been really in the last 50 or so years where they've become much more conservative in their thinking and much more kind of escapist as far as believing in kind of like rapture theology and things like that. And then Universalist, of course, is the fact that we believe that Christ died for all, that all are children of God. Ultimately, everything's reconciled to God, that because God is sovereign, that He can't be frustrated or thwarted. Some people have the idea that God is on one side and Satan's on the other, and that they're locked into this eternal battle for your soul. And some people have that idea, but we believe that God is the creator God, the sovereign God, and if He's omnipotent and omniscient, how could any being or anything else thwart His will? Of course, in addition to that, we don't believe Satan is some being out there somewhere that is creating havoc like Loki or something, but that God is in control of all of His creation and ultimately reconciles everything back to Himself. How that all works out, we don't get locked into too many specifics because sometimes that can create more barriers, so we'd rather have a more general approach to that. So I think that's helpful. But we would agree with a lot of the other Universalists just in that respect. I know there's different forms of Universalism, but for the Primitive Baptist Universalists, that's just what we focus on, those four areas where you have God's sovereignty, and then we don't interpret the Bible in a literal manner. We interpret it metaphorically, and of course we're mostly preterists, so we don't see that there is some physical end of the world somewhere out in the future and some judgment, and that we promote a thinking faith, which I think that comes back to the inclusiveness of the earlier Baptists, where you've got more freedom of thought, where you can actually question things and not be crucified because you may have a different perspective, and kind of bring all that out and have these discussions.
Everything came from God and everything's going back to God, don't matter what it is. It has its source in God, it's got its head in God, it's got its being in God, no matter what it is. So just like human being, when he leaves this world, the scripture says the body goes back to the dust and the spirit back to God. So that's kind of universal right there, Hell to me is just like heaven. It's a state. It's not a literal place. It's a state. And when you're lifted up in ecstasy here, and that's like rapture. There's no scriptures in the Bible teaching a rapture. Men take that, as that way, but and rapture is just a lifting up, and that's what it is. But hell is, or the torment of it, the fire is God. The scripture teaches that God is a consuming fire, and that fire, some way, somehow, He punishes man for his deeds, and he plainly tells us that we'll pay for everything. They take that because we believe that Christ died for us and He's going to reconcile all back to Him, that there's no punishment, and that you can do, that's the first thing they throw at you. Well, if I believed that, I'd do anything I wanted to. But see, that's showing you that they think they're getting paid for being good. I'm going to go to heaven because I don't drink, or I don't run with women, or I go to church and I give, it's kind of like that Pharisee's prayer, I thank God I'm not like other men. I give 10%, and I don't do this. I'm not like old poor homeless man. I work for a living, It's to me, and that's why a lot of it, and that's why they get so mad, I think, too, What's so bad if God is going to save everybody? Why do they get so mad? And then they hate you. A lot of them will hate you with vengeance people that you thought were friends, I mean, they'll turn on you. Family will turn on you.
I've heard the phrase "no hellers."
Yeah.
Why is that a phrase?
Well, when this movement happened in the early 20th century, there was a group of what we would call the mainline Primitive Baptists. They're the Calvinists. They see that predestination is something that has to do with God calling some people for heaven and some for hell, kind of like in traditional Reformed theology. And then you had some that began to understand Universalist thought, and so that became a way to kind of strike at them, that, oh, you're the no-hellers. And that kind of took on its own life. The people that are called no-hellers, they don't generally like that, because they'll say, well, it's not that we don't believe in hell, we just believe it's here instead of in the afterlife. And so that's where a lot of that came from, just from the detractors that just wanted to separate themselves out. So that their sign may say Primitive Baptist, but that's the no-hellers. And that generally tends to be in the South where you find that, especially around the Appalachian areas where they've had these splits. Typically in the Primitive Baptist Universalist churches, they'll have what's known as hymn lining. They'll line out hymns, which is the leader will call out the text of a song, and then they'll sing it with a lot of slow emotion. And Ralph Stanley actually came out of that tradition, and when he sings some songs, it has that mountain kind of melancholy sound to it, and a lot of that came out of that type of singing that they do. So they'll generally sing like that for a while, then they'll have prayer, and then they've got preachers that they'll have preach kind of emotionally charged sermons, and kind of go from there. It's really quite simple. That's the good thing about, at least in the realm that we're in, is we believe that services could just be kept simple, and there's just not a lot of high liturgy. It's fine if that's what people like, but we like to keep it just simple.
We're not that far off as people think we are, and we're not that, we're not some devil sent down. And if people could just see that God is the Father of all, there's just one blood in this world, and it's God's, and He's put it in every one of us, and we're all a part of Him. And if He would lose anything a part of Himself, He'd be losing Himself, because we're His makeup. We're a part of God. And that's what people don't see. They got it. God separated. He's way out there somewhere. Everything's always way out there, even hell, even resurrection. But it's all right here. Right here's where we need it.